We're going to be looking at the development routes from talent identification through to elite performance. Now, this is the first part of routes to sporting excellence in the OCR A-level specification. And as you can see from the image in front of you, we're looking at talent identification, and we're going to see what needs to take place, what provision needs to be put in place in order for that progression through to elite performance and potentially getting our athletes onto the podium, winning medals. So as you can see, there are 8 icons there, 8 different things that we can potentially say need to be put in place in order to take these talented individuals through to elite performance. So let's have a look at each of those in turn. The first one at the top there you can see is an image of an individual with a star above the head, and that depicts the concept of a talented individual. So one of the first things we can say is that we're looking at talented individuals, and so therefore there needs to be talent identification involved. And so certainly something which the exam board have identified they will accept as a good response or a credit-worthy response in this area is that there has to be talent identification programs in place in order to pick up that talent, in order to recognize it in the first place. The second icon you can see there is a football pitch. It's depicting facilities. Now, one thing that you need to be very, very careful of, very mindful of when you are talking about facilities is that the exam board will not accept facilities on its own. As you'll see just now, they are looking for you to say high quality facilities, world-class facilities, specialist facilities. If you just say facilities, you are not going to be credited with the mark that you perhaps thought you might be. So please make sure that when you're talking about facilities, you're talking about high quality facilities in order to help these individuals along that pathway. Similarly, the next icon down you can see is a coach, and as we've just said with facilities, you need to make sure that you are talking about high quality coaches. So both facilities and coaches on their own aren't sufficient. High quality, specialist, world-class facilities, world-class coaches is what you need to say. Now, the next icon there, if you look closely enough, you can see that it's a kind of a medical report, and you can see that there's lines and data coming out from the head, from the chest, from the main torso and the limbs. So in this case, this depicts or refers to screening for desirable attributes. Now, what that means is that the national governing body, for example, let's take rowing as our example here, might be looking for specific attributes, for specific characteristics that individuals possess in order to be successful in that sport. In rowing in this case. So if an individual is tall and they have long arms and long legs, they have long levers, that's ideal for rowing, and therefore that might be deemed as being a desirable attribute. Similarly, if they have very good cardiovascular potential, they're able to keep working for a long period of time, that also might be a desirable attribute. And so we can screen individuals to see if they have, if you like, the makings of becoming an elite performer, even if they might not be already participating in that particular sport. Moving on from that one, you can see the next icon. There is someone giving treatment to somebody else. So in terms of this development route through to elite performance, here we're talking about the provision of sports science. And again, in terms of the exam board, be really careful that you say more than sports science. If you just say sports science on its own, you're unlikely to get accredited mark. So you need to give examples. So in this case, we might say sports science physiotherapy, we might say exercise physiology, we might say biomechanics, we might say some kind of sports medicine. But please make sure that you give an example rather than just saying sports science. Moving on from that, we've got an individual who looks as if they're having a hard time, perhaps a little bit angry or frustrated or something. And this depicts the provision of sports psychology. Now, obviously, you're studying that in part of your A-level, and you'll be aware of the importance of sports psychology and things like stress management, things like anxiety management. How does an individual or a team cope under pressure? And sports psychology has become a huge part of working and helping to support elite performers. The second to last icon there is the pound sign, so that would obviously represent money. So in this case, we're talking about financial support that is made available for elite performers, and that support may be in the form of providing transport, providing for equipment, providing accommodation, etc., to get to competitions or what have you. So there will be some kind of financial support available for performers. And lastly, the podium with a trophy is if we are going to identify and help individuals develop through this pathway, we need to make sure that there is a competition structure. So there are competitions at each age group, so that we can see the talent rising to the top. If we didn't have these competitions, we wouldn't be able to recognise, we wouldn't be able to nurture the talent, and therefore competition is really, really important. So there's your 8 points. You probably won't need to make all 8 points if you get a question about developing routes from Talent ID through to elite performance, but there are 8 points there which you could really make a good go of at answering a question on this topic.